Hi everybody, welcome to lesson 3-1A. If you need to pause the video right now to take out your notes and your calculator, please do that now because you are going to need both for this lesson. In lesson 3-1A, our goal is to be able to compare rational numbers, both positive and negative. Now last year in 6th grade, you compared two numbers that were both positive. Well, this year, now that you're in 7th grade, you're going to be comparing numbers that are negative as well. When we're comparing positive and negative numbers, we're going to be using these inequality symbols: greater than, equal to, or less than. Now remember back in elementary school when you used these inequality symbols, they were like the alligator, and the alligator eats the bigger number. Remember the mouth opens to the bigger number? Yes, that's true. But if you see these inequality symbols in isolation by themselves, you need to know what they mean. So if you take your left hand and you make an inequality symbol like this, left hand less than, it looks like the less than symbol. So if you're able to make it with your left hand, it's less than. Also, sometimes students think that thinks that it looks kind of like an L, so that's another way to remember. Left hand less than, and also looks like an L. All right, let's get started. We're going to first start with something that you already know how to do. So here we're comparing two positive rational numbers. It's always easiest to compare two numbers when they're written in the same form. And the form that's easiest to compare is decimal form. This number is already written in decimal form. So I'm just going to write it down below and leave it just how it looks. Now here, this one is written in fraction form, so I can use my calculator to take 3 divided by 4 and change it to a decimal. Now I know that 3/4 is 3/4 of a dollar is 75 cents, so it'd be 0.75. So 0.75. Now I can use place value to compare the numbers. So I see that they both have 0 in the ones. Let's look in the tenths. Same, same. Let's go to the hundredths. In the hundredths, there's nothing, so that would be a 0, and this would be a 5. Bigger, even if you read the numbers, 70 hundredths and 75 hundredths. Which one is more hundredths? Bingo, this one. So remember, big mouth opens to the bigger number. Let's read it from left to right. 7/10 is less than 3/4. See, you know how to do that. Okay, let's try another one. Here's number 2. We're going to be comparing 1 68 hundredths to negative 1 1/4. Again, it's always easiest to compare if they're written in the same form, decimal form. Well, this number already is written in decimal form. Let's go ahead with this one. Now you notice how it's a negative fraction? So I'm just going to drop that negative down. It says 1 1/4, so 1 and, I take the 1/4 and I'm going to change that to a decimal. 1 divided by 4 in my calculator is 0.25. Now take a look at both of these. Here is a positive 1.68 and a negative 1.25. Positive numbers, aren't they always bigger than negative numbers? Yes, they're always to the right on the number line. So positive numbers are always bigger than negative numbers. In fact, I didn't need to show any work at all. If I'm comparing a positive to a negative number, the positive one is always bigger. Big mouth opening to the bigger number. So if I read it, 1.68 is greater than negative 1 1/4. Always positive numbers are bigger. Now, let's get to the good stuff. But before that, just kidding, a quick review. What happens to the value of numbers as you move to the right on the number line? So when I move this way on the number line, what's happening to the numbers? Yeah, they're getting bigger, absolutely. They increase in value as we move to the right. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Now, what happens when you move this way to the left? What happens to the numbers? Yeah, they get smaller. They decrease in value. Smaller and smaller and smaller. The further to the negative, into the negatives we move, the smaller the numbers get. Okay, this can be really helpful thinking as you are comparing, especially two negative numbers. Let's try that. Two negative numbers. All right, so we want negative 39/4, and we're going to compare it to negative square root of 25. Now, numbers are always easiest to compare if they're in the same form. What form? Starts with a D, decimal form. Okay, so let's change them both to a decimal. If this is a negative number, it will be a negative number when I convert it to a decimal. So with my calculator, I'm going to type in 39 divided by 4. I get 9.75. So negative 9.75. Okay, if it's a negative fraction, it's going to be a negative decimal. Now let's try this one. Negative square root of 25. I'm going to drop down the negative and square root of 25. Do you know that? Yeah, it's 5, isn't it? Because 5 times 5 is 25. So I'm comparing negative 9 75/100ths to negative 5. Do you know which one's bigger? Maybe. Let's actually plot these on the number line. Let's see where they would be located. Well, negative 5 would be right here, and negative 9.75 would be about right here. Now, what did we say before? Numbers get smaller as they move more and more into the negative side, and they get bigger as they move to the right toward the positives. So, are you able to put the correct inequality symbol in there? Maybe. Now, let's compare negative 9.75 and negative 5. Let's take away the negative symbol right now. Which one's more, 9.75 or 5? Isn't the red one more? Yeah, now, which one's more negative? Well, 9.75 is more because they're both negative. This one is more negative. And if it's more negative, it's further left, so it's smaller. The more negative it is, the smaller it is. So this one's smaller, which means this one is bigger. Big mouth opens to the bigger number. So I would say that negative 39/4 is less than negative square root of 25 because negative 9 75/100ths is less than negative 5. Now notice here, bigger mouth is opening to this number right here, the blue one. See how it's to the right? So you can ignore the sign and ignore the negatives and say which one's more. 9.75 is more than 5. It's more negative, so it's smaller. Okay, let's try another one. Here we go, comparing two negative numbers. It can be tricky because it's on the left side of the number line. I know, it's hard. Okay, first we want to change them both into decimals so we can compare them easier. So we've got, let's switch colors up here, purple. Negative 10/3. So I'm going to drop the negative, and I want to take 10 divided by 3 in the calculator to get a decimal. 10 divided by 3. That's 3.3 repeating. All right, then over here I have negative 3.75. That is just a decimal, so I'm going to write it just as its decimal. Okay, now do you see how this is, this is out to the tenths and this is to the hundredths? Remember, this is 3.3 repeating. So to make it both two decimal places, I could just put another 3, because remember it's going to go 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 forever. This might make comparing just a little bit easier. Now, before we look at the numbers, let's put this up on the number line. Negative 3.75 would be right about here. And negative 3.3 repeating, 0.3333, that's a third. That'd be about right here. So they're pretty close together, aren't they? And we're not always going to have a number line to help us compare. Pretend that's not even there. How would we compare these two when they're both negative? Let's cover up the negative sign. Take a look at the numbers. Which one's more? 3.33 or 3.75? Which one's more? 3 33/100ths or 3 75/100ths? Well, which one's more? The red one. The red one's more. So because they're both negative, this one is more negative than this one. More negative means it's more to the left. It's less, okay? The further we go to the left, the more negative it is, the smaller it is. So this one's smaller, that means this one's bigger. So big mouth is going to open to the bigger number. So we've got negative 3.3 repeating is greater than negative 3.75. And we can see that from our picture too when I plotted the numbers up there. Let's try another one. Still comparing two negative numbers. This one's already a decimal. Let's change this one into a decimal so we can compare. All right, negative 0 9/10, already a decimal. Now this one. negative, because it's negative, I take 4 divided by 5 in my calculator, 4 divided by 5, and I get 0.8. Okay, now let's compare. Before we look at the numbers, I'm going to graph this. Do you see how from 0 to -1 it's broken up into 10 tick marks? Each of these is a tenth. This is -1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, which is a half. So if I were to graph this, the blue one, this would be -9/10, and then this would be -8/10. So you did this back in 6th grade. Okay, only you did it on the positive side. Okay, so I just graphed them so you can get a visual. But again, what if you don't have a graph? How do you compare them? Okay, this is 9/10 and 8/10. I'm going to ask you to cover up the negatives between a 9/10 and an 8/10. Which one is more? Yeah, the blue one would be more, wouldn't it? 9/10. Okay, now because they're both negative, this is more negative. And more negative means it's smaller. Okay, it's more into the negatives. All right, so this one's smaller, making this one bigger. So big mouth is opening to the bigger number. And we can see that it's to the right, isn't it? Yep. Okay, so we've got -9/10 is less than -4/5. So to do this, we cover up the negative and compare. Right? We can compare the place values right here and right here. We see the blue one is more, so it is more negative, smaller. Okay. We are on to number 6. Here we go. Comparing two negative numbers again. All right, -5/9 compared to -0.5 repeating. Okay, let's change them both to decimals. -5/9. Ooh, do I even need to type in 5 divided by 9 in my calculator? Do you know what's going to happen when I divide that by 9? Yep, it's going to repeat. So 0.5 repeating. And over here, I have -0.5 repeating as well. Yeah, this is going to go 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. What do we know about? Less than, greater than, or equal to? Absolutely, these two are equal to each other. They're the same thing, all right? And they're both negative. So we put the equal to. Sometimes you'll get an equal to. All right, we are ready for number 7. We're going to do a comparison of rational numbers in a real life situation. So let's see what we have here. Team A, here's Team A, won 6 out of 7 games. Team B over here won 7 out of 9 games. Which team won the higher fraction of games? Okay, higher fraction, that's more games. So Team A, 6 out of 7 games for this team, and Team B, 7 out of 9 games. So we're going to figure out Team A or B, which one won a higher fraction of games. Team A, 6 out of 7. I'm just going to replace Team A here with a 6 out of 7, and Team B won 7 out of 9. Now, here we can see what fraction of games they both won. Well, which one's the higher fraction of games? So in order to compare these easily, they need to be in the same form. They are in the same form. They're both fractions. But what form is easiest to compare? Starts with a D, decimals. So let's change them both to decimals. 6 divided by 7 in the calculator. I don't know that one, so I'm going to type that one in. It's a repeating decimal. I'm going to start putting a few of the digits. I got 0.857, just a few digits. Now let's go over here to this one, 7 divided by 9. Well, wait a minute, I don't need a calculator for that, because I know when I take a number and divide it by 9, it's going to repeat. The 7 will repeat, 7, 7, 7, 7, on and on and on and on forever. Okay, so let's look at the place value. These are both positive numbers, so I can do this how I've always done it before. 0, 0, they're the same in the ones. Let's look at the tenths. 0.8, 0.7. Right away there, I can see 8 tenths, 7 tenths. That's bigger. This is more. So big mouth opens to the bigger number. 6 sevenths is greater than 7 ninths. So Team A won a higher fraction of games because it is a bigger fraction. So Team A won a higher fraction of games. Yay, Team A, good job. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you can understand how to be able to compare rational numbers, whether they're positive or even trickier in the negative. You definitely need a calculator to help you, and remember, you're comparing them both when they're written in decimal form. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining me.